Hello, everybody. Welcome back at track 2 of our first TYPO3 online community event. If you want to participate to the event, you all know it. You still need a ticket. So just jump over to our website and get one if you haven't one already. And then you can get access to our MetaMost server and can chat with us and the speaker and the participants and have a lot of fun. Like the last talks, after the talk, we will have a short question and answers part, which we will stream over YouTube. And then we will stop the YouTube stream, and you can join us in Jitsi directly and talk to Benny and ask him the questions. But now let's start. Everybody's ready. We heard some great talks today about very different topics. And our last talk for today perfectly fits in this role, I think. So please welcome the TYPO3 Project Lead from the community, Benni Mack. And he will tell us his favorite features which did or did not make it into TYPO3 for version 10. So Benni, the stage is yours. Have fun.
Thanks a lot. So nice to have that organized so well. I really like the spirit and that you've all set this up. So that's really, really cool. Yeah, and what am I doing? I'm trying to start from the beginning of my presentation. So first, I thought I could talk about so many things, but I think it's always good to not just talk about the things that are great in version 10 or in the latest version, but also my favorite things, because I'm also just a human like you and everybody else. I'm the TYPO3 project lead, as mentioned. What does that mean? I hit the release button. I actually have a release button, but I'm also, of course, reviewing all functionality or most of the functionality of TYPO3 core, and plan the releases and what features should go in, etc. But I'm also using TYPO3 in my company. So I set up TYPO3 installations, I add content to TYPO3, I configure TYPO3, and I also develop functionality through XBase or whatever PHP things that are needed. And yeah, I actually do work at a company. I'm not employed by any TYPO3 association or GmbH. I work at a company called v10, based in Stuttgart, Germany, but we're distributed across Germany. And our philosophy is that we want to use the latest versions of TYPO3 as soon as possible, because then we don't have to argue about with customers that we need to upgrade TYPO3 because they're running out of support. So we do this very early, or we actually start new releases, new versions, or like new projects based on a sprint release. So by the time we're finishing this website, we jump directly to the next LTS version. And we have probably 20 to 25 TYPO3 installations in production, and 10 of them are running on TYPO3 version 10 already. So some would call it's bleeding edge, but if you're keeping yourself up to date, it's actually much easier also to estimate the updates and see if the new features actually work. Okay, so today I want to talk with you about the features that because I've been using TYPO3 version 10 in production on real-life projects. I want to talk about the features that I liked so far the most. Number 10, the password reset for backend users. So if you upgrade to version 10 and you have any backend users, they have now forgot your password link, which allows to reset their password, which is really something that you think, I use a password manager. Well, I do, for instance. I don't forget my password, but we have customers, and some of them might forget their passwords. This feature actually made a lot of sense because a lot of people then, because they forgot their password, call up the TYPO3 GmbH and tell them, hey, can you reset my password? Of course, they don't know any installations that are out there, so they can't do that. But now they can tell the customers, hey, just add your email address and you'll get a resend link. And actually, I used this feature already for a customer, and or for a colleague, and that was really nice. And it's possible to activate this feature for editors, but also for everybody. That means for administrators as well. So you have a little bit of option where how to set it and how to tune it. But that's the one thing. The other thing is that you can actually trigger such a reset from the TYPO3 backend if you're an administrator, or through the CLI process. So that allows you to create a new editor. You set a random password, like super secret, and then you send out the reset email, and the customer themselves add their own password, and you'd never need to know and send the password through plain text, through email or whatever. And actually, be sure to add your email address to all of your backend users. That's what's missing here. So you should have, of course, in order to have this feature work, you need to have an email address for each backend user that you want to reset. All right, we're still at number 10. Number 9, the dashboard. So I hope you've heard the talk by Richard this morning. The dashboard is a nice feature that looks like this. And that's one of the default widgets that are there. This morning you had a chance to listen to what all the widgets are there and how to build widgets. I think it's a good thing that we have a dashboard which is flexible, so it's customizable for everybody who's using TYPO3. And I hope to see a lot of cool widgets that make sense. You know, like an editor does not need to know how many failed backend logins are there. Or a backend editor might not need to have a link to the TCA reference. But you know, there's room for improvement for everybody to continue working on widgets that are really, really powerful and helpful, and TYPO3 Core ships the framework for it. Okay, next one, accessibility. The accessibility topic was kickstarted as an initiative, and you know, it's usually for people with disabilities, and that's maybe what you think. If you've heard the talk by Helmut this afternoon, you know that you're privileged, and some are not as privileged. But at the same time, accessibility does not just mean, oh, somebody with visible disabilities can now use the TYPO3 backend. Well, to be honest, they can't use it properly. But we're working there, and that's why there's the accessibility initiatives. And at the initiative week, they produced some really cool results, which means that you can now navigate through the page tree and the module menu with your arrow keys without using a touchpad or a trackpad or a touch display or your mouse, but you can actually just use the keyboard. You don't have to move your hand. And of course, it's also helpful for people with disabilities. All right, my number 7 feature, HTML emails. Well, TYPO3 could send HTML-based emails already, but if you've played around with TYPO3, there are a lot of hidden features. There are like system emails that can be sent if you log into the backend, to the install tool, to the backend as an administrator, and then it sends out an email. And this email was like super ugly to customize, if that was even possible. And now we actually send all of these emails through our new HTML email feature. Workspaces had a notification feature as well, based on emails, which is now also as HTML based. Same goes for Link Validator or the Frontend Login plugin. That's probably the one you use most, and it was usually very hard to get any additional information or translatable emails sent. So this is all done and covered with the new HTML email feature. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to write HTML email templates. We have a default styling, and it's completely customizable with Fluid. And you can also set any option to say this TYPO3 installation should only send text-based emails. So you also have a text template instead of HTML template, which is also Fluid based. And the API, I really like the API for custom extensions because I previously built a similar API in probably most of the projects for sending out emails. And now I can use that one that is shipped with TYPO3. All right. Next one, dependency injection. So dependency injection, that's for all the nerds here. Some people would say, some people will love it, and some people would say, what's the benefit? Like every person who's not a PHP developer in our company is like, so what? But I like it because we're now able to decouple PHP logic from configuration better, and it's gone through the whole TYPO3 core. So Xbase had its own implementation, but now we have a standardized system that can be used throughout the whole core in nearly every place, and you can exchange every class easily. So every system that uses dependency injection, or every component in TYPO3 that uses dependency injection, imagine it's like a X class on purpose. So that's really nice to have these abilities. But why would we do that? The cool thing is it's actually faster than Xbase dependency injection, because these so-called dependency trees are built during a composer install command, or when you flush the caches in the install tool and not in the TYPO3 backend. It takes a while to build this dependency tree up, but that's really in one time, and then it runs forever. And Xbase was kind of like, oh, do you need that? I'll try to find the right dependency for you. And so we have a good solution, which is based on Symfony. And it's nice because you can also use the dependency injection for options and configuration. And this system is also supported. Well, let's put it this way. All the previous Xbase functionality is now built into this global dependency injection. So Xbase dependency injection just got better. And the main focus is on so-called constructor injection and not inject properties or inject methods, although they're still working. But the constructor injection is much more standardized throughout PHP. Has a lot of advantages. And you can configure dependency injection not through xlocalconf, but there's a services PHP or services YAML file. Depends on what preference you have. And the cool thing is this dependency injection, as mentioned, can be used for configuring CLI commands, events. You can configure caches like that. And because it's all done at build time, your xlocalconf file gets smaller. And every time you throw something out of your xlocalconf file, every request will get faster in backend and frontend. All right, so that's a bit too technical. Let's go to some features that are actually helpful for the non-developers. And Georg Ringer created this feature to compare backend users and compare backend user groups available in the backend users module. where you can select, I want to compare these two and see in what groups they are and what groups they inherit. I would say we had a similar feature in TYPO3 version 4, but somehow this feature was not recreated, and now we have it back in a nicer way, in a much flexible way. Looks really good, and it's really helpful if you manage a lot of users or groups, because you can also do it for backend user groups. Number 4, lazy image loading. The lazy image loading might be something that kind of slipped through the most of the official announcements. That was an idea that I had, I think, while I was on vacation, because I was reading up on some notes from Google where they implemented this HTML standard. And it's available in Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari if you switch on an experimental toggle. And I don't know if you've ever had websites where you had tons of images, but they were just on the very bottom of the page, and actually your browser loads all of them. And the image loading, the browser native image loading, which is implemented now in all the browsers, just need one HTML attribute to define if this image should be loaded right now, or it just if it got moved into your browser view in the viewport. Previously, we did a lot of crazy things in our company with JavaScript libraries or JavaScript homegrown things to say, okay, as soon as it hits the view, we'll change the source attribute from clear GIF to something else. But the lazy image loading is, again, it's an attribute which you can just use in every browser who supports it, respects that flag. If it doesn't, then it just loads the pages as before. And what we've done with version 10, it was a small change, but if you use fluid styled content, all the images in fluid styled content can be changed from lazy to eager, or you can even do more fine-grained changes in your fluid templates. And you could do that in version 9 already, which I would recommend you to do. But version 10 has the, I think, fimage or fmedia view helper that now understands this HTML attribute. And this is how it looks like. It basically, on the one side, you see it just downloads all the images, even if your device, in this case, a mobile device, does not, you will never see that image, and you're on the train and it just downloads a lot of stuff. And the right side, you see the loading equals lazy, and then your browser decides when to load this. The browser just knows so much more about the current system than your JavaScript, for instance, because the browser knows, oh, you're in a slow connection, or you're in a medium connection, or you're on a Wi-Fi, and can download things faster or slower, depending on the environment. So I really like that feature. It's a small detail, but again, not mentioned that much. And then there's another feature called Asset Collector. That's also a feature we tried out in the wild for a couple of websites before it was added to TYPO3 Core. It's based on the premise on how AMP works. I don't know if you heard of AMP. It's Accelerated Mobile Pages. Now it could stand for everything, but it got out of that. It came out of that initiative from Google to tell to have basically fine-grained restrictions on what your website could contain in terms of CSS, JavaScript, or HTML, and it almost allows like a limit of maximum CSS code or CSS bytes, and a limit of JavaScript that can be done. And what it helps us in our company, for instance, it helps us to reduce the amount of JavaScript we need to write. So the concept of the asset collector was, let's take the learnings we had from the AMP-based websites we built and put that in a more generic way. And if you only have a limit of CSS that you can include, maybe it's not good to have one large CSS file for everything, because on the one page you have a slider, and on the other page you only have text, and so you don't need all the CSS for every subpage you have. So the asset collector is actually, it's an API, and we also ship Fluid View helpers to include JavaScript and CSS in your Fluid style or in your Fluid template. So if you have a gallery or a video content element, you can say this content element needs this JavaScript library and let's say jQuery. But if that content element is never loaded, we don't need to load this jQuery library all the time. So that feature I would have loved, I don't know, 6 years ago when I had to deal with different jQuery versions in PowerMail and others, which all brought their own jQuery versions. And now they can actually just say, I need jQuery, and then it's only added once. So if you have 2 galleries, 2 slideshows, it only adds the requested CSS and JavaScript once. And this is how it looks like. I heard I should also show some code. This is some code I actually just copied out of a one-time project I did a couple of months ago. And it's from a content element. It's the Fluid-based custom content element that I created. It's the front-end output. And the front-end output says, okay, I have a div, and in the middle you see that I have a f asset CSS. Oh, let's require this library, or the CSS file. Let's require the CSS for just the video quiz CSS. And then I also need some JavaScript and some inline JavaScript. And that's it. So this stuff is only loaded if there's this content element on the page. All right, next one. Number 2, PSR14 event handling. So event handling, so you've heard about these PSR14 or PSRs, which are like standards. And the event handling is, let's say, a different name for what we know as hooks or signal slots. And the main issue is that we use hooks in our way, and we register hooks through xlocalconf. And then signal slot is a different registration process. And you always need to look up in the source code, what does that hook exactly do? What can you manipulate? What can you read? What can you go bring back? And as mentioned as before, if you put something in xlocalconf, it just has overhead. And if you register it differently, like on demand, that's much nicer. Why is this one of my favorite features? That's very simple. I've been looking for a unified way for all TYPO3 core, because signal slots were from XBase, and they have their drawback on how they were implemented. So I asked in the PHP framework interoperability group to pick up this topic. And so I became part of that working group to define this recommendation. So I like it because I could bring all the issues that I had with our TYPO3 implementations into this working group, and we solved it for our use case. Yeah, so it's a personal problem feature for me. And apart from that, PSR14 in the way it's built it's the same way on how to use it with Symfony and with TYPO3, but also hopefully with a lot of other frameworks or CMSs as well. So Drupal, for instance, has hooks. They have a different kind of hooks, and WordPress has hooks, and it would be really cool just to to use the standard for everybody. So I hope to see more of that sooner than later. What we've done with version 10 is we actually threw away all the signals and rewrote them as event listeners. So you can still use all of them. And we haven't really touched hooks yet. But that would be one of the further steps to migrate all the hooks. So it took me a lot of time to migrate from signal slots. So you can still use them, so your extensions are compatible. But version 10 is the right place or the right version to migrate all the signal slots to event handling, to PSR14. But also, if you have any other hooks, just use PSR14 because it has a nice speaking API. Yeah. And my number one personal favorite improvement of version 10, or why I like version 10, because it's an easy upgrade. So what does that mean? You might hear me talking about this quite often. For us, we had some projects where we upgraded from version 6.0, 6.1, or version 7, and we had a quote to update to version 9. And we actually were able to upgrade to version 10 without, it didn't take that much longer, not at all. So if you've gone through all the way to version 9, going to version 10 shouldn't be an issue in the same run. So I really like that there are breaking changes, and I would say of the functionality that we removed or deprecated between version 9 and version 10 is it's just a third of what we've removed. Depends on your use case. If you're hit by that change, if you've migrated to version 9 quite nice already, so then upgrading to version 10 shouldn't be an issue, except if you're using Internet Explorer 11 or your customers. So I actually had a couple of customers calling me up and said, oh, it's not working anymore? Yes, we told you before. But so there are still people using IE 11 for the backend even. Yeah, so these were my 10 favorite things of version 10. And because we still have a bit of time, let's talk about the 10 things you didn't see in version 10.
Benny, one
Yes.
question. Do you want questions now, or should we put them later at the end of your session?
Let's take them at the end of the session.
Okay, you're fine.
Okay. So 10 things you didn't see in version 10 to be included. There are a lot of things, and I want to talk about that because you might think it's interesting, or maybe you think it's interesting to get the background of the whys for the yes and the no. So number 10, we did not integrate the news extension, even though it was so popular. It is so popular. And what's the reason for not including the news extension? There are a lot of them. I would say there are a couple of good reasons to not have everything in core. One is that well, in this case, you have an active maintainer who's doing a really good job to maintain at least 2 versions of 2 major TYPO3 versions to have the news extension compatible. And he's really giving a lot of feedback back to me and, of course, to the rest of the core team. Thanks, Georg, on if there's something that we broke and we can revert and fix it while we're working on version 10. Number 1, we did not integrate, number 9, we didn't integrate solr. Solr is a great search engine, probably better than indexed search, but you have such a huge minimum system requirements that we said, of course not. So it's not really an option, but it's still not there. However, what about mask? Mask does make sense. it's really cool. That's what I hear from a lot of people, that you can create your custom content elements, and that's what apparently everybody's talking about, in a very quick fashion. And we actually hope to see the results from the Structured Content Initiative to be part of TYPO3 Core, which did not make it in version 10 yet. And that's why we don't just copy code over it, which is also difficult to do if you don't have the copyright from the person. Number 7, front-end editing. There was something about front-end editing. We still don't have it. We still don't have it in core. We still don't have a lot of solutions for having a robust solution for front-end editing. Like, how do you manage content elements that are included by include records that you're only allowed to see and not to edit? How do you deal with let's call them control fields that you don't see in the front-end editing place? And we actually have to rebuild a lot of things and make it possible that we already have in backend to also have it in the front-end. And even though the front-end editing extension is really moving forward in that direction, and also Matthias, who's on the other live stream right now, is doing great work, that we still haven't found good solutions on how to integrate front-end editing without having everybody to adapt their front-end templates with Fluid. Number 6, things that people want for a long time is a Headless API or Headless TYPO3 and a REST API. If you've built your own API, it's always about defining what you want to expose, defining on what you want to give to people. And for a lot of people, Headless CMS or Headless TYPO3 means that we just dump the content without any templates for a page, which makes some sense, but that's not real headless. If we want to do something, we want to do it right, and just reading out the content as JSON, that's possible, but we actually want the flexibility to modify content, to create content through an API, through a REST API, and that's when we talk about authentication. So how do we authenticate and give permissions to such an API in a proper way to exactly define what we want to expose? So there's the Headless initiative, and I think they're actually showcasing what is possible with TYPO3 right now, and that's really good to solve some issues that people have with Headless when they need it. And people who need it, I think it's usually a buzzword, and it's a good thing that once you talk about it, it's not always clear what they want to achieve with it. And to find that out, it's usually good to have, like, let's say, a middleware to just render the content as JSON, which is very easy, which I also have done for version 9 already. So the next one that did not make it in version 10, a ReactJS-based frontend backend. So we still don't have a JavaScript framework in the backend. What's wrong with us? Because we removed XJS, we still have jQuery, but we don't have one of the popular Vue.js, ReactJS, Angular. It's not there. There are a couple of reasons why, and one is that we need to know the release cycles and the support lifetime for these frameworks. And because it's JavaScript, these frameworks have like a, hey, let's update to the next major versions in the next 6 months lifetime. And that's really hard for a system like us where we maintain up into 7.5 years of support. 7.5 years means if we decide now for version 11 that we use ReactJS, I have more than another year for version 11 LTS. And then we have 3 years of free support and 3 years of ELTS. And I think it's very difficult to find the right framework that can promise us this. So the JavaScript world is very unclear on this, and I think we need to, of course, at some point, if there's a use case for it, look into ways to do that, and also allow possibilities to hook into ReactJS-based or Vue.js-based components to be as flexible as we are with our existing system. Number 4, people, especially PHP developers, said, can't we just throw away the non-composer mode and just have everything run with composer, and then throw away our xdm-conf and just have composer deal with all the dependencies? We could, but I mentioned this yesterday in my other talk. Right now, we don't have a clear scope of how many TYPO3 installations are out there. And I would say if your company uses Composer and you like it, then you're privileged, as we've heard from Helmut actually, because there are a lot of people who say, hey, I can't do this because I don't have the time, and the time in my work time is not given, so I have to deal with what I have. And if we take that away, we would take a lot of market share away. So I would say that there's at least 90% who is not using Composer-based installations in the wild right now, after talking to some TYPO3 hosters. So, there's no option yet. Maybe we'll find ways to migrate everybody to Composer while having a nice upgrade path towards that, and also find good ways to do an auto update for Composer as well. Number 3, why don't we just get rid of all the TypoScript? TypoScript is complex. It's hard to read, hard to understand. Well, I haven't, maybe you have an idea. I haven't found a solution how to get rid of TypoScript without introducing a new custom configuration language that defines what data should be fetched from the database in what way, without writing PHP. And that's why it's still there, because it serves its job, and removing it would, again, make a lot of people unhappy because TypoScript solves a lot of issues for them. And introducing something new would mean migrations and also having a really extensive feature set as well. We also didn't introduce themes in version 10. Well, of course, you might say, oh, you didn't even mention this. Yeah, but I just wanted to tell you why it's not there yet. Themes isn't in TYPO3 10 because I haven't found the right way to ship themes that are easy for non-TYPO3 developers to integrate. There is still a lot of different things we have to worry about, and it's not just about Fluid, but it's about paths and site extensions, doing a lot of more things, and unifying the configuration of custom content elements and template paths. And what if you have a theme and you install news, then it should also look into these kind of things. Yeah, so we're working on that. Not just towards that goal, but actually, let's put it this way: if we find a better way to exchange our templates without having to touch 20 areas, that would make our current lives easier. Plus, themes might be possible. So it's a good chance. Plus, there's also the T3 terminal, where there are actually themes as extensions, which is also cool. And then we have the grids. Why don't we have grids in TYPO3 core? This is connected to something called structured content, and also I think it's connected to mask, and it's connected to the page module. And the structured content initiative, if you're up for this topic, it's really cool to see that they're not going the let's code first way and then think about it later, or not think about it later, but more like a let's think about how it could work for editors later. They actually go the other way around and see how should this work. If you have like a really if you have a layout without having a defined backend layout and nested content and container content elements. Of course, the easy way, like back then with real UL, could have been just integrate one of the common extensions into TYPO3 core, and we're done with it. But this wouldn't really solve all the issues. Every of the extensions that are out there has their drawback, and maybe we could even achieve more in terms of usability to create such content or container elements that that might be much better. And that's why it's good to wait and help the structured content initiative to make grids as a drive-by feature possible, but also define really custom content elements by default in TYPO3 core, plus hopefully a better TYPO3 page module. So that were my 10 favorite things and my 10 other things I wanted to talk about. I'm curious to hear what your favorite 10 things in TYPO3 version 10 are.
Okay. Thank you, Benny. Thank you. Very interesting. We have one question in the chat, so perhaps I read it. If you're talking about integrating dependency injection throughout the core, are there any plans to deprecate general utility make instance? Which would be an anti-pattern.
There are no plans to deprecate this. There are plans to deprecate the object manager because it doesn't have any benefit over general utility make instance. However, if you take, let's say, if you use XBase and you have a new domain model and you just want to create one in your controller, previously you used object manager get. And if you use general utility make instance, you now have the same benefits because an entity does not have any dependencies for services. This should go into another place. So you could just use new. In this case, new makes a lot of sense. However, if you use general utility, people could X-class your stuff. Plus, in this case, it doesn't make sense, but general utility also does the log manager thing for you. So I would go with general utility all the way for the time being.
Okay.
Or not for everything, but for everything that's not a service.
Okay. Okay. So as we have a little delay to YouTube, we should wait a little bit. The people already made use of Composer as I think that was about the theme extension manager or replacing it, or Composer only mode.
Yes, I talked to Christian this morning already, and he has implemented an auto updater, which I haven't investigated further since this morning yet. About this topic, I might have mentioned it. I did not mention it yesterday because I talked about Composer as well. I'm not saying I'm against this feature to having everything in Composer, but it's a lot of work, and we always have to evaluate if it's worth the effort. However, I would like to move in this direction, and we're actually moving in this direction slowly.
Yeah, it's a big topic. Daniel asks, what's your favorite food? Completely off topic.
Oh, Daniel. So I'm at the office, and next to the office there's a nice restaurant takeaway, and they have the greatest pizza, which I like. So I love it. I could eat it every day, almost. So I like pizza.
Fine. Okay. Fluid-based FE login would be is a favorite of version 10. Yes, I can.
I asked about that.
Yes.
It's good. I'm glad to. That's actually one of the last parts, the last really visible parts for most people, where we did not have Fluid in place. And every time we do such a migration, like we've done with index search, it feels like we're moving into this. It's more like a organic, one big piece of software instead of having all the old things in place. There are a couple of other places. Also with the HTML emails, we got rid of a lot of marker-based templates, and that's really nice to make use of them.
Yeah, can think about it. There's a question about the asset collector. Are resources from the asset collector included in the concatenation of resources, or are they always included separately? So this aims at browser caching of files.
I have to recheck that. I'm pretty sure it's not concatenated, but I don't know for sure. I think it was added later on, or at least prepared for having.
Are there any best practice resources for implementing APIs with TYPO3? I think it's about documentation or...
There's a best practices, let's say it's not an initiative, but it's something that Daniel Siebmann invested in. And he has a group of people who want to demonstrate best practices across TYPO3. So it's definitely worth talking to him. He's also at the camp.
Benji asks if the manifest support planned for the asset collector. Manifest support. It's a front-end thing.
I have it on my personal list, but it's a very low priority. But that would be something to add. If Benji wants to do that, that would be really cool. I never managed to talk about that when I talked about integrating news into core or front-end login. One of the good things that things are not in TYPO3 core is that people can add these features quicker than with our release cycle. So if there's something new popping up, you don't have to wait until the next LTS release. So also with the manifest support, it's currently not in the working, but if it would be there, we would have to wait another more than a year.
Yeah.
So Benji, no.
Olivier asks or wonders, I wonder if you are going to work on the decoupling of front-end and back-end, so for an alternative front-end rendering?
There are quite a few things that will be breaking if we are doing that, and we're actually doing that since version 8, I would say, to separate things. A lot of the things that people like the event handler is trying to decouple our components like XBase from front-end and back-end. And once we have achieved that, it would be quite useful to make sure this works. I would say we're like 80% there to decouple it, but the rest is, most of the stuff is really, really, really breaking.
Yes. Okay. Then there's a question regarding version 11. What are your favorite features for version 11?
My favorite
Perhaps
features of
somebody has
version 11.
listened to your talk yesterday, where you talked
I'm
about
looking
it.
forward to, I think, a quicker way to set up sites, an even quicker way to create a new website up and running faster.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm looking in the chat. Ta-da. Okay. Then Daniel asks, what is the best way to support your daily work on TYPO3? Personally, I think.
That's a good question. I would say sponsoring me on GitHub would be really nice. But apart from that, it's quite good if you have a specific, for instance, bug that you want to have fixed, or a feature that you want to have fixed, to sponsor this and to send an email to me or to Matthias and say, I want this feature and I would like to sponsor it to make it happen. How much money do you need, and can we gather that around? So we'll see if it's possible. Always check with me first.
So ask for concrete support and not please do something with the course, but do exactly this. This issue is most important for me, so please fix it.
That's really, really helpful. And most of the people who approach me in Slack or via email are really friendly and ask about support and are not as demanding. So that's all fine.
But I think we know this all from our daily business with customers who say the website isn't working. Yes, but say me what is not working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. There's a link to your sponsoring. Fine.
And also, it's good to be a member of the TYPO3 Association.
Yeah, of course.
To sponsor my work, because without the TYPO3 Association, I don't know, I wouldn't be in that work that I'm doing right now.
Definitely. Having someone in the back who's always there.
Yep.
Is very important in such a big project. Okay. So I see someone is typing. No. Fine. Okay. So thank you, Benny. I would say we will stop the stream on YouTube now and open the Jitsi room so the people can ask you personally. Just give us a second. And at 5:15 we have a closing session. It will be streamed on track 1 and it closes the first day of this community event, but it will be announced at the campfire and MetaMost and on social media. So for now, goodbye YouTube audience. Have a nice evening and we will see you later. Yeah, bye. Thank you.